Bonjour, and welcome back to Southwest France. My name is Gene Sandbloom, and about 7 years ago, I bought this 200-year-old farmhouse and about 2 acres surrounding it, and I've slowly been having fun with it. Today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, and that's wine. And I'm not going to make this like a big, deep, heavy wine conversation. We're going to have some fun with it. This area is known as Cahor, and it's pretty much all red Malbec. It's a really amazing wine. I didn't even try it before I moved here, and I've absolutely fallen in love with it, and I actually search it out when I go back to the United States. So it's a big inky wine. It's got a lot of fruit in it, and the type of wine is perfect for people in the United States because it really fits their type of wine that they like. So what we're going to do today, we'll do a quick little look at the big French wine regions and where you can go for a Cab or a Pinot or a Chardonnay or a Merlot or a Syrah. And we're also going to go grape picking. But first, I've got a little sad story to tell. We're going to go down to my vineyard. So in 2016, shortly after buying the house here, I hired a gardener, so to speak. I didn't really have a gardener, but he helped me out with certain landscaping projects. And he told me that he had put in a vineyard for someone else. And I said, wow, I've always wanted a vineyard. Let's do it. So we went all in, put up the trellising. There's an irrigation system in place. There's a pump to get the water to the irrigation. Everything is here for a great vineyard, except the 500 or so grapevines that we planted here in 2017. That year, there was a horrible frost, and vineyards all over the area lost just hundreds of grapevines that year. And the fact I had all baby grapevines planted here, it was devastating. On top of that, a few months later, I came back to the property, and when I had left to go to the U.S., there was a job offer. I went back for a few months, and I made an unannounced visit back here. And when I got here, the vineyard was buried in about 4.5 foot tall weeds. So on one end, you had these suffering grapevines from frost, and on the other end, nobody was taking care of it, despite the fact that I had made arrangements to have it taken care of. So to this day, I keep it trimmed, but I'm being advised not to plant another vineyard due to the changing climate in this area and the fact that so many of the vineyards in the area that are down low are actually moving their vineyards up onto hillsides. That's just ill-advised, they say, for me to try and attempt to plant another vineyard here. So I've been pulling up all the little mesh wires that were around the old grapevines. There are a few grapevines that are still here, and I'm going to transplant these up to the patio where hopefully I can use them for trellising for the roof of the patio. So let's take a walk up to the top of the house. I'll show you where I'm going to transplant these grapevines. I'll show you where they're telling me that I can actually have a working vineyard on the property. And then we're going to walk up the street because I heard the trucks this morning, and most of the vineyards in the area are owned by a cooperative. And the cooperative, they take care of the vines throughout the growing season, and at the end they bring in a machine harvester and they actually harvest the grapes, and that's going on right now. So let's go up and see the place on my property for the vineyard and the harvesting going on right now. This area here is right behind the patio, and it's just along behind these curtains here that I want to plant the grapevines so that they will eventually reach over the top and cover the roof, or the trellis, so to speak, at the top of the patio. This area here, just above the garage, is an area they said that it is feasible to do a vineyard. Not a great deal of space. I would have to cut down 8 trees, possibly 10, to make it work, but at least it's possible. Let's walk up and see the harvesting. So all of the grapes for the co-ops are harvested by machine, but some of the larger wineries that have higher end wines are still picked by hand, as do some of the smaller growers in the area, where they'll invite you over for the afternoon to help out pick their grapes, and they'll serve you lunch. This year in Cahor, it was incredibly dry. These grapes right here were left after the harvest. They're just too shriveled up, and they just don't have any liquid inside it. So let's head up and help one of my neighbors pick grapes in his 2 different vineyards.
Là, il n'y en a pas, là, il n'y en a pas. Voilà. Là, il n'y en a pas. Et j'avais pris des gants, non?
Oui, moi j'en ai dans le camion. Après, il y a une paire de gants que j'ai mis là-bas qui vont être géniaux.
Ça? Non?
Non, merci. No.
Voilà, ouais, c'est ça, c'est ça, c'est ça.
C'est bon.
Oui, c'est ça.
Pas juste ça.
T'as regardé ton portable, mi amie?
Non.
T'as regardé ton portable? C'est étonnant que Patrick soit pas là.
Tu as bien expliqué?
Oui.
Because it was so dry this year, they got about half as many grapes as they normally do. But the wine should be really great and concentrated. I was really excited when they gave me a bottle of wine from last year's harvest, just as a preview. When I first started getting serious about drinking French wine about 20 years ago, it was like trying to memorize an encyclopedia. It just seems so complicated. They don't put the grape varietals on the bottles. But the more that you drink the wine, and then the more you understand why they do what they do, it actually makes a ton of sense. So let's oversimplify it. Let's look at it from a US perspective. If you like a Malbec, Cahor, where we are right now. If you like Syrah, go for a Rhone. If you like a big Pinot Noir, go for Bourgogne. If you like a light Pinot Noir, over in the Loire, go for a Sancerre. If you like a Chardonnay, go for a white Bourgogne. All of the white wine in Bourgogne is Chardonnay. All of the red is Pinot Noir. Riesling from Alsace. And then over here in Bordeaux, it's really easier than you think. If it's on the left side, this is the Garonne River, this is the Dordogne River. You have this Entre-deux-Mers in the middle. But if it's over here on the left-hand side in a Médoc or Graves, then it's predominantly Cabernet Sauvignon. If it's over here on the right-hand side on Pomerol or Saint-Emilion, then it's Merlot. There are lots of other variations that go with it, but the more you understand what a Bordeaux represents, and then as you dig deeper to what a Saint-Emilion represents, and then you go even deeper to what the individual winemakers make, and you start to understand Saint-Emilion will always be a Merlot-driven wine, but it will be done in a certain style. Tends to be younger, drinkable wine compared to over here on the left bank with Cabernet Sauvignons, really, which are made to age. The Rhone region is one of the oldest wine regions in France, and there are villages all over. What's really great is whether it's a Cornas or a Gigondas, uh, once you tasted a wine from, let's say, Gigondas, they have a very specific flavor. They're required within the village, if they're going to put Gigondas on the label, it has to have specific grapes that are allowed to go in the wine. They even have certain rules about how long they're allowed to leave the grapes on the vines before they pick it. All of these rules means that wines in Gigondas has a very similar style. So unlike America, where you just say, hey, I like a Cabernet Sauvignon, that Cabernet Sauvignon could come out of a box from Central California and say Franzia on it. Or it could come from Napa Valley and say Screaming Eagle on it for $2,000 a bottle. So to say that you just like Cabernet Sauvignon, the statement is just really vague. And when you understand the areas of France, and within the areas, the villages, and then within the villages, the actual specific winemakers in those areas, you begin to understand that just by looking at a label in your mind, you can paint a picture of what that wine's going to taste like. The best way to learn about French wine is to take one region at a time and just immerse yourself in it. I've been trying to get my head around just the wines of the tiny area of Cahor for the last 7 years. And so how about let's hop on the moto and let's head to one of my favorite wineries in the area, Chateau Chambert. Très bien.
Là, vu que vous connaissez celui-ci.
Oui. Je n'ai pas familier avec là et là.
D'accord.
Oui.
Alors, pour vous donner un ordre d'idée, ici à Chambert, on a 3 terroirs, 3 types de
pour le practice, le français. Eh bien.
On apprend plus facilement
Oui.
aussi. Donc celui-ci, pour la vinification, il ne voit pas du tout le bois. Donc c'est vraiment quelque chose de très fruité.
Qu'est-ce que c'est le mot pour nose?
Le nez.
Le nez.
Oui,
Le nez est très bon.
oui. Il est en 2008. On avait 7 bouteilles et 7 étiquettes.
Ah,
Alors
so le grand vin de Chambert, mais
voilà,
similaire.
c'est ça.
Oui.
Alors qu'en fait, ça correspond à 7 bouteilles aujourd'hui.
So avez-vous le grand vin de Château Chambert à la 16?
Là, du coup, ça va être différent.
So la différence est quelle heure? 17? 18?
Au niveau de la vinification,
Not a whole lot makes me more self-conscious than watching myself try and speak French. In fairness, I was asked up front if I'd like to do the tastings in English. The larger wineries usually have someone that speaks some English, but I requested French because if you don't push yourself, you'll just never learn. So I discovered Chateau Chambert in the supermarket. They have good wine for 10 euros a bottle, very good wine for 15, and great wine for more than 50, which will need another 20 years to age. You know, a bottle of Mouton Rothschild goes for over 500 euros a bottle. But unless you're an oligarch, you can skip the Mouton and find incredible wines all over France at really great prices. You just have to hunt them down. And I found dozens of wines in Cahor that drink in a class high above what you would pay for them. You just have to buy them here. You won't find them down the road, much less exported to the US. En 7, en 8, en 9. So I had mentioned there was a stream on the property. Last year, 2022, the drought was terrible. The stream stopped running, I think, late May all the way into the end of October. This year, it was still running in September, and here it is November. We had a rainstorm last night, and now it's running again. So I'm going to show you the stream. So the stream has obviously been here for centuries. It's the dividing property line between myself and the owner of the horses over here on the side. We're very close to the beginning of the stream. I bought a topo map, and about 1 kilometer up is a large spring where most of the water comes from. And then there's just a trickle above that, which goes about another kilometer where another smaller spring is. So this spring and the stream flows all the way down to the Lot River, which then flows into the Garonne River, which goes past Bordeaux, some of the greatest vineyards in the world, and then goes into the ocean. So speaking of vineyards, since I love Cahor wine so much, and being in America, it's not the easiest thing to find them either in your supermarket or a wine store. Usually a good wine store or a good wine section in your supermarket, you'll probably find 1 or 2. But I thought what I would do is count down my top 5 favorite Cahor wines so that if you do stumble across them, you know which ones to buy. Wine number 5 comes from Chateau Eugenie. It is the Reserve de l'Aïeul, and it has a silver label and retails for about 17 euros in your supermarket. Wine number 4 comes from Chateau de Cèdre. They make several different kinds of wines, but this one simply says Chateau de Cèdre on the label and Cahor, and it retails for about 18 euros. Wine number 3 comes from Crocus, which is a joint venture with US winemaker Paul Hobbs. The one you want to look for, or one of my favorites, is called La Califère, and it retails for about 35 euros. Wine number 2 comes from Chateau de Chambert. Chambert makes so many different kinds of wine. The one in particular here that you generally find in the market simply says Chateau de Chambert and retails for about 18 euros. Wine number 1 comes from Chateau de Hausser, and I've actually found this wine in really nice restaurants in the United States. It's called Hausser de la Dardine and retails for about 43 euros. It's really fantastic wine. So as I said earlier, every village that makes wine has rules for what goes inside that bottle if they want to put the name of the village on the outside of the bottle. So whether it's Bordeaux and Saint-Emilion, or it's Gigondas in the Rhone area, or here in Cahors, there are certain rules for that wine. And the number one rule here is it has to be 75% Malbec. The other 25% can be more Malbec or Merlot or Tannat. Another really weird rule is that it has to be red wine. So Malbec's a red grape, Merlot's a red grape, and Tannat's a red grape. So why wouldn't it be red wine? Well, that's because the inside of every red wine grape is actually white wine. So there's a wine here called Paradox, and it's 100% Malbec, but they make two kinds. They make a white and they make a rosé. So if you want to make a white wine out of a red grape, you just squeeze it and get rid of the skins. If you want a rosé wine, you squeeze it and then you let it sit with the red skins for a little bit of time. And then normally for a red wine, to get that tannic ruby red color, you let it sit with the skins for a really long time. The other thing from my top 5 list today is that I had to be able to find these wines in the supermarket. There are so many amazing wines I found here if you go to the winery, but that's not going to do you any good. It's hard enough to find these different kinds of wines as it is. So to make it easier, every single one of these top 5 wines is available, at least here in the supermarket. On a slightly smaller scale than Chateau Chambert, I'm joining my neighbor Anthony and his family for a visit to Chateau Ponac. You'll never forget the names of husband and wife winemakers Virginie and Matthew Moline. Their names are on the front of every bottle. They made us feel incredibly welcome. Plus, I even found out that Matthew is the mayor of my 500-year-old village. After drinking freshly pressed Chardonnay and Chenin Blanc juice from the tanks, we walked through their aging caves. Matthew and Virginie aged their wine in a variety of different vessels. Cahor Malbec is so powerful, they tend to limit the amount of oak for aging their wine and opt for unique containers like these ancient amphorae. These are the same containers they used to transport wine in ancient Rome 2,000 years ago. Ponac has vineyards next to the Lot River and far up on the hillsides. Big and small, limestone to clay, and they knew what makes every vineyard special. They generously open bottles of all their best wine, including Virginie's prized Merlot. They aren't allowed to put Cahor on the Merlot bottles because all Cahor wine must be at least 75% Malbec. So her wine simply says singulier, stressing the added E, making the French feminine version for the word singular. One of the most fun ways you can learn about wine is to do your own blind wine tasting. So I invited over the neighbors and bought 4 nice bottles of red wine from 4 different French wine regions. I wrapped the bottles in foil, and then we randomly numbered the bottles. Then we made up index cards so you could record your guesses which wine was which. A Rhone that was 100% Syrah. A Bourgogne that was Pinot Noir. A Saint-Emilion that was Merlot. And a Cahor that was all Malbec. I cooked up some duck and mushroom tacos to go with the wine, and of course we had some great cheese. Revealing which wine is which is always fun. We compared scores, talked about which wines were our favorite, and then we could enjoy the wines all over again, knowing what we were actually drinking. This was the first time these neighbors were over to the house, but even with my limited French, we were all really good friends a full 5 hours later. And what is that? 3 is the Cornas. 3 is the Cornas. 3 est Cornas. Yes.
Alors le 1,
So,
Bourgogne. Ah, il est bon.
where are the cups? Oh, here we go. Run the trois.
Right, number 3. Right, we've all got a bottle each.
Attends, on va mettre les petites.
Le Bourgogne est
Number 6.
Cahors.
Un.
Yes.
Parce qu'il y a bon.
and le
Comment,
corps
c'est bon?
est de.
Wait, yes, je suis là.
A couple of years ago, my daughter and I went to Bordeaux, and we spent the day in Saint-Emilion. I had an amazing time. It's such a beautiful village. But when we went into downtown Bordeaux at night, we really wanted to drink wine and try some things we haven't had before. And it was really pretty discouraging because we would go to some of the wine bars where they would have the vacu vins where you could have a taste of the premier Grand Cru wines. And I went through 100 euros in about 15 minutes and I barely had a glass of wine. And I was really starting to get frustrated on how I was going to learn about Bordeaux when I couldn't even afford it. And then it hit me. Just go to Carrefour, the supermarket. And we did, and for less than half the cost of a bottle of one of those premier wines, I got a case of wine and brought it home, and there wasn't a single bottle that I didn't love. So again, you don't have to be intimidated by the expense and the complications of French wines. Just go to the supermarket in the areas where you're at and buy some wine and take it home and try it.
C'est traité bio, biologique.
Thanks so much for joining me. If it inspired you to open une bouteille de vin, please like this video. I do a new video on my American life here in France every week. Please hit subscribe if you'd like to join me next week when we go in search of Halloween in France.
Voilà. Oui.